Is Canada's lofty plan to tackle climate change starting to get lost in the smog of facts? Well, a new audit by the Federal Environment Commissioner revealed Canada will fail to reach the 2030 climate targets set out in the Paris Accord. It was a damning report. Most provinces have not even established any targets to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and those that have them don't have a plan to reach them. Now, the federal government has responded and says the audit doesn't include their new plan. It looks backwards. But even their new plan at this point won't work. Add in the growing provincial opposition to the carbon tax or the price on carbon in places like Saskatchewan and Alberta and the main opposition parties in Ontario, trouble is brewing. So what will the government do to get on track or stay on track? Let's find out. The Environment Minister, Catherine Mckenna, joins. I always say we've known each other long before you got into politics. That was a pretty, the report was damning. Let's say it. I know you say it's looking backwards, but the provinces don't have a plan to reach their targets. What are you going to do about it?
So I think, first of all, something that's really amazing about this report, first-time auditors general across the country looked at climate action. That's great because we know climate change has a huge cost. It's flooding people's homes, their forest fires. The Arctic is literally melting. But the report actually looked back. And I know that you said that, but it is true that it looked at the fact that there was no action under a decade of Stephen Harper. And she actually said, in terms of looking forward, that this is the most significant, best climate plan Canada's ever had, the one we negotiated with provinces and territories. And I've always said this, we're 100% committed to meeting our target, and we're working with provinces. We're phasing out coal, historic investments in public transportation that's improving people's lives, making investment in clean technology.
I think, though, there's also a credibility problem, frankly, because, first of all, you're on target. They're the same targets of Stephen Harper. So on the left, and some of the progressives say the targets are not good enough anyway. And then the original date to hit the targets was 2020. Now we're 2030. We keep missing targets. Why should anyone believe you'll meet these new targets way off in the distance in 2030?
They should believe us because we're taking action, and for the first time ever we had a plan. We have not had a climate plan. So for people who say this is Stephen Harper's targets, if you have targets but you don't have a plan to meet them, it's worth nothing. Our emissions were going up when we came into government, and actually the UN report, it showed 200 megatons. That probably doesn't mean much to people. That's a significant drop in our emissions. So things take time, and hard things are hard.
I get that, but you're still missing targets.
But a 2020 target.
The economy's growing. They're still being missed. When you had the pan-climate agreement, the Canadian agreement on this, Alberta was saying, look, we'll do this. We'll accept your targets on emissions and your emissions caps, but in exchange for the Kinder Morgan pipeline. Now Alberta is saying, until we get that pipeline, because they're afraid it's going to be delayed to death, we're not going to act on that. What will your government do to ensure that that pipeline is actually built before the next election?
So, I mean, the pipeline is being built, and we've approved the pipeline. And I think it's also hard for some people can't understand. I'm the Minister of Environment and Climate Change. Why would I be supporting a pipeline? This fits within our climate plan, and also we're in a transition, so we have to be smart about this.
Don't skim over BC. It's an NDP premier who doesn't want it. There's Burnaby around Vancouver. They're challenging this in the Supreme Court. The mayors don't like it. I mean, you could say, oh, we want it, but you have not convinced the government or the people of BC to have this pipeline. They don't want it. And they're going to try to delay it and delay it and delay it until it dies. And Alberta knows that. What are you going to do to ensure that doesn't happen?
So as I say, the pipeline is being built. There was a decision. There was a decision by court once again that it can go ahead. We've said it's clearly in the federal government's jurisdiction.
And now, of course, the key is opponents of that pipeline are waiting and waiting, and then Rachel Notley will face an election against Jason Kenney, who doesn't want your price on carbon. So then that's the other piece. Jason Kenney, if he wins that election, he's going to oppose it. Doug Ford in Ontario, that's a very close election. If he becomes the Premier of Ontario, he will challenge it. What do you do about Doug Ford? What do you do about Jason Kenney?
You know what I do is I talk to Canadians, and Canadians want action on climate change. They know it's real. Like whether you live in Alberta or BC and you've had huge forest fires, or you've been in Ontario, Quebec, you've had flooding. Like we need to see action, and so Canadians overwhelmingly.
Based on that, they oppose it. You can't say Canadians support it. If they elect Doug Ford, it's a big if, let's wait, but if they do, they will have elected him because he opposes that carbon tax or carbon price.
Well, first of all, people vote for many reasons in elections. I don't know what's going to happen in that election, but it doesn't matter. We've been clear. There is going to be a price on pollution across the country. 80% of Canadians live where there's a price on pollution. That was part of our climate plan.
how will you punish a province that tries to take you to court and won't do it? Yeah, because that's what would happen under Doug Ford. That's what would happen to Jason Kenney. And later on the program, we've got Brad Wall, the former Premier of Saskatchewan. They don't want to do it. What will the government do?
Well, they'll lose in court. Manitoba looked at this issue. They got an opinion, and the opinion said it's well within the federal government's jurisdiction to put a price on what we don't want, pollution. But let's be clear, like, climate change has huge costs now. I have no time for folks who are like, we shouldn't take action.
What do you mean you have no time? You got to have time. You got it. Well, your job is to have time for folks that care about this issue and want to understand it.
I don't have time for politicians that play cynical games about climate action. The cost right now is in the billions of dollars.
But politicians have priorities. You got to have. This is the problem that people say the Liberals smack of arrogance. Your job is to have time for people who disagree with you.
I have time for Canadians who disagree with me, and I have conversations with them all the time. I meet with people. I meet with businesses.
Elected leaders are Canadians. You know that.
But I don't have time for politicians who pretend that climate change isn't real. Well, how can we do this? I have 3 kids. People have kids.
Who says that?
Well, if you have no,
they're not saying that.
If you have
they're saying
no
they don't like the mechanism
plan,
for you to deal with.
No, actually, so let's be clear. In the provincial election, the Ontario provincial election, we had 4 leadership candidates. In the Conservative leadership election, no one had a climate plan. Not one of them. How depressing is that? That I don't know, maybe they believe in climate change, but if they're not going to take action, how are they going to help save this planet? And at the end of the day, it's about our kids. It is about making sure they have a sustainable future and that we're all working together. That's why I get frustrated when when you have politicians who don't want to do anything. They have no plan. It's easy to say you don't like one piece of the plan. No, you actually have to have an overall plan, and they don't put up anything. They don't want to take action, and we don't have a choice. We already see the impacts of climate change across the board. Canadians know that.